In the earliest hush of morning, before cities gathered themselves into stone and shadow, before walls rose and names were carved into monuments, there was a garden no one owned. It is said that the first healer did not live in a temple. She knelt in grass. Imagine the hour before sunrise, when the sky is neither dark nor light, but suspended between breath and becoming. Dew rests on every blade like scattered stars. The air is cool, almost oceanic in its stillness. Somewhere beyond sight, a river moves in a low, patient murmur, and there, marked by the moon's fading glow, a figure bends toward the earth. Her fingers brush leaves still silvered with starlight. She does not call herself a healer. There is no word yet for such a thing. There is only listening. When did the earth first whisper its remedies to human ears? Some believe it began not with knowledge, but with grief. A child fevered, a hunter wounded, a mother weakened after birth. Illness was not yet an enemy to conquer, not a battle to be won. It was a shadow passing through the body, a veil drawn briefly across the fire of life. And in those moments, human hands reached not upward to distant gods, but downward, into soil, into root, into leaf. Beneath the silence of forgotten ages, the garden waited. In a clearing near a riverbank, a small band rests. Their shelters are woven from branches and hide, their fire reduced to a low spiral of ash and ember. An elder sits apart, back curved like an old tree shaped by wind. Before her lie smooth stones, worn by years of touch. Between them, she places a bitter root pulled from the damp edge of water. She crushes it slowly. The scent rises, sharp, green, alive. It curls through the morning air like invisible script. Children wrinkle their noses. A young man watches, memorizing the angle of her wrist, the patience in her movement. Knowledge here does not travel in scrolls or carved tablets. It passes in gestures, in the tilt of a hand, in stories murmured beneath moonlit branches. Each plant carries a memory, each leaf a quiet instruction. Whispers tell us that in caves where the walls are marked with ochre hands and running animals, something else rests in the dust, pollen. Ancient grains of yarrow and chamomile pressed into the earth beside bones, buried not as decoration, but as offering, as if the dead might still ache, as if comfort could follow them beyond the threshold of breath. Archaeologists, in their careful brushing of sediment, have found these traces. They speak softly of burial sites, where medicinal flowers lay like small suns against crumbled rib cages. They name the plants in Latin, they measure, they record. But beneath the silence of those chambers, another story hums. It is said that long before names were given, humans noticed patterns. A certain bark eased pain when chewed. A certain flower calmed a restless mind. A leaf pressed to a wound slowed the red river of blood. There were mistakes, yes. There were bitter lessons learned in shadow. But slowly, through watching and waiting, a map formed, not on parchment, but in memory. In forgotten corners of the earth, the first pharmacies were not built of stone. They were forests. The healer near the river lifts the crushed root, mixes it with water cupped in her palm. She speaks no incantation, yet her breath is steady, reverent. The sick child lies nearby, eyes half closed. The paste is pressed gently against warm skin. There is no certainty, only hope, woven with observation. Some believe that early humans understood something we have allowed to fade, that the body is not separate from the landscape, that to heal one is to tend the other. Illness was not a foreign invader, but a disturbance in the spiral of balance. And the answer was often found within walking distance of the fire. Under starlight, knowledge deepened. Elders spoke of which plants grew where the soil turned dark and wet. They remembered the taste of leaves that cured stomach pain and those that brought only sorrow. They told stories to anchor memory, a tale of a hunter who ignored the shape of a leaf and paid the price, a story of a grandmother saved by a blossom that opened only at dusk. These were not lectures, they were lullabies of survival. Where memory fades, the garden remains. Across continents, separated by oceans and desert wind, similar rituals unfolded. In ancient China, healers traced the pathways of energy through the body, pairing roots and herbs like notes in a celestial song. In Sumer, clay tablets bore quiet inscriptions of plant remedies. In the highlands of the Andes, leaves were chewed to soften the bite of altitude and fatigue. Different languages, different skies, the same instinct to kneel. And yet, as centuries turned like pages in an unseen book, something shifted. Cities rose, walls grew higher, knowledge gathered itself into institutions, into libraries and guarded chambers. The garden, once central, became peripheral. The healer's hands were replaced by instruments of glass and steel. There was progress, yes, miracles born of study and discipline, but beneath it all, a contradiction lingered like distant thunder. How could something so simple, so near, fade beneath the dust of centuries? It is said that forgetting rarely happens all at once. It happens slowly, a generation that trusts the field less, a season when roots are traded for powders, a moment when the scent of crushed leaf is deemed too humble, too uncertain. The garden was never lost, only forgotten. Walk now in your mind through a modern field at twilight. Asphalt hums in the distance, streetlights blink awake, yet in the cracks between stone, green insists. Dandelion, chamomile, wild mint, uninvited, unowned, marked by the moon. Beneath our paved roads and silent fields, the old medicine still grows. It waits without resentment. In laboratories, scientists rediscover what elders once held in calloused palms. The bitter bark becomes a named compound. The calming flower is distilled into measured drops. There is a strange poetry in this, ancient whispers translated into modern tongues. And yet something remains unmeasured, the act of kneeling, the humility of asking the earth. Perhaps the true medicine was never only chemical, perhaps it was relational, a quiet agreement between human and soil, a recognition that we are not separate from the dust that clings to our feet. In the earliest hush of morning, the healer still kneels, not in a distant past, but in a memory carried in the body, in the way your shoulders soften when you step into a forest, in the way breath deepens beside water, in the instinct to reach for tea when the throat grows sore, to place a cool cloth against fevered skin. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. As twilight settles over this ancient riverbank, the elder finishes her work. The child's breathing slows, the bitter scent fades into night air. Stars reappear one by one, like seeds scattered across velvet sky. The garden hums in darkness. Crickets begin their quiet hymn. The river continues its endless recitation. The healer leans back, hands resting in her lap, eyes reflecting firelight and starlight alike. There is no applause, no certainty, only a soft understanding that life and earth are braided together in ways too intricate to fully name. And as you drift toward sleep, perhaps you can imagine it. The dew-soaked grass, the silver leaves, the first light touching the horizon. Somewhere beneath concrete and memory, beneath noise and forgetting, a root pushes gently through soil. Waiting. It is said that the earth still whispers, but only to those who kneel and listen. It is said that somewhere beneath the desert wind, behind a gate half buried in drifting sand, there once stood a chamber lit only by trembling flame. Imagine it now. The walls are cool stone, faintly marked by time. Shadows breathe against their surface. Clay jars line the edges of the room, sealed with wax, their rounded bodies catching the glow of firelight. Inside them rests something luminous, amber sweetness held in stillness. Honey, sunlight captured in gold. Before it was spooned into tea or drizzled over bread, before it became an afterthought in glass jars on quiet shelves, honey stood at the threshold between life and death. In forgotten corners of the earth, it was not merely food. It was offering, balm, preservation, a sacred bridge between what breathes and what fades. What did the ancients understand about sweetness that we have allowed to dissolve? We move softly now through the inner sanctuaries of Egypt, where the Nile once rose and fell in patient rhythm. Marked by the moon and guided by stars, priests stepped across cool temple floors, carrying bowls of thick amber light. Their fingers dipped into its warmth, then pressed it gently into wounds torn by stone or blade. Honey sealed what was broken. Its quiet alchemy slowed decay. It drew moisture from infection. It guarded flesh from the desert's hunger. But it was not used carelessly. It was handled as one handles something sacred. Its scent filled the chamber, floral, sunlit, faintly oceanic, like the memory of summer trapped inside clay. In burial chambers carved deep into crumbled rock, linen-wrapped bodies were layered with resins and oils, and among them honey, spread between cloth and skin, poured into cavities, a luminous veil between the mortal and the eternal. It was believed that sweetness could accompany the soul on its journey, that what preserved the body might also steady the spirit. Beneath the silence of pyramids and tombs, honey waited in darkness, thick and patient, guarding names carved in stone. Whispers tell us that in ancient Egypt, beekeeping was not simply labor, it was devotion. Bees were tended as celestial creatures, born from the tears of a sun god. Their hives were shaped from clay cylinders, placed along riverbanks where blossoms bloomed in spirals of color. The bees hummed their sacred geometry into existence, hexagonal chambers precise as prayer. Each cell a small cathedral, each drop of nectar gathered from dust and bloom. In the vast silence of the desert, bees moved like living symbols, tiny custodians of order and sweetness in a landscape of ash and stone. But Egypt was not alone in this reverence. Across the sea, Greek physicians wrote of honey as divine medicine. Hippocrates himself, it is said, recommended it for fever, for wounds, for exhaustion of the body. He spoke of its warming nature, its ability to draw out what harmed and seal what healed. Honey was mixed with vinegar and herbs, stirred into tonics that tasted of earth and sun. In clay tablets pressed with cuneiform marks, ancient healers recorded mixtures of honey and ash, ashes from sacred fires, ground fine and blended with resin. These combinations were not only chemical remedies, they were rituals in substance, fire and flower, life and what remains after burning, honey and ash, two opposites bound together, one sweet, one bitter, one golden, one grey, one drawn from blossoms, the other from flame. Some believe that in these pairings, ancient minds were tracing a deeper truth, that healing often lives at the meeting point of opposites, that sweetness without fire grows stagnant, and fire without sweetness destroys. In temples and homes alike, honey was placed on altars beside bread and wine. It was poured in libation to unseen forces. It sweetened the mouths of newborns and soothed the throats of the dying. It was offered to gods whose names are now veiled by centuries of dust. And yet, there is a quiet contradiction resting here, like a forgotten jar in shadow. Something so ordinary now once guarded the threshold between life and death. How did the sacred turn commonplace? Perhaps it happened slowly. A generation that forgot to whisper gratitude before opening a jar. A season when sweetness became abundant, no longer rare. Industrial hives replacing riverbank clay, sugar replacing nectar, the sacred hum of bees reduced to background noise. Where memory fades, reverence thins. But if you listen carefully, really listen, you may still hear it. At dusk, when the air cools and the sky softens into lavender and gold, bees return to their hive. Their wings carry the faint dust of fields. The hive itself glows from within, amber and alive. Inside, honey thickens in its chamber, patient as ever, marked by the moon. In forgotten monasteries of medieval Europe, honey was still treasured. Monks tended hives within cloistered gardens. They harvested wax for candles that lit long nights of prayer. They stirred honey into herbal remedies, preserving knowledge passed through fragile manuscripts and quiet hands. Honey traveled along trade routes, carried across deserts and oceans in sealed amphorae. It sweetened the bitterness of medicinal herbs. It soothed throats worn raw by wind and dust. And always, beneath its practical uses, something symbolic endured. Sweetness as grace, as mercy, as remembrance. In some ancient rites, the dead were given honey cakes to carry into the next world. It was believed that sweetness could appease guardians of unseen gates, that a taste of gold might soften the passage from one realm to another. Perhaps this was less about gods and more about hope, a belief that what is gentle and luminous in life might continue beyond the veil. The bees themselves became emblems of order and cooperation, their hive a spiral of harmony, their labor unseen yet essential. In the architecture of their hexagons, human minds glimpsed celestial design, a reminder that sweetness requires patience, that abundance is built one small gathering at a time. Beneath the silence of history's ruins, honey remains unchanged, its molecular structure as it was thousands of years ago. Archaeologists have opened ancient jars from tombs and found honey still preserved, thick, golden, untouched by rot. Time itself seems to hesitate before it. It is said that honey does not spoil, that it resists decay. In this perhaps lies its deepest symbolism. Sweetness that endures, a substance drawn from fleeting blossoms, yet capable of outlasting empires. As you drift now toward the quiet edge of sleep, imagine that temple once more. The trembling flame, the clay jars, the scent of resin and ash. A priest's hand hovering over a wound, pressing golden balm into torn flesh. A whisper of gratitude carried upward with smoke. Imagine the hive at dusk, bees settling into their chambers, the last light of day resting on wax and wing, honey thickening in its hexagonal cradle. The medicine of sweetness remains unchanged. Only our memory of its holiness has grown thin. Perhaps it was never meant to vanish entirely. Perhaps it waits in simple gestures, in the slow stirring of tea, in the careful tending of a garden, in the quiet hum of a hive beyond the city's edge. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Beneath the silence of modern life, beneath the noise and haste, the ancient temple of honey and ash still stands. Not in stone, but in memory. In the body's quiet recognition of warmth and balm, in the instinct to soothe with sweetness when pain draws near. And as night deepens, as stars turn slowly above you, imagine one small jar resting in darkness, sealed with wax, holding sunlight in stillness, waiting. Perhaps the sacred was never lost, only veiled, and in the hush between breath and dream, you may almost hear it, the soft, steady hum of bees building their golden cathedral in the dark. Beneath a limestone arch where the earth opens like a quiet mouth, there is a chamber few have seen. The entrance is narrow, half veiled by hanging roots and creeping ivy. At dusk, when the sky bruises into violet and silver, moonlight spills across the stone threshold and fades into shadow. Inside, the air is cool, oceanic in its stillness. Dust floats in faint spirals, disturbed only by breath, and there, arranged in careful silence, lie bones, not scattered, not abandoned, placed. It is said that some of them are dusted with red ochre, their hollow curves glowing faintly like embers beneath ash. Others are accompanied by seeds, small, dry, patient things, and carved amulets worn smooth by touch. Near the ribs of one skeleton, fragments of willow bark remain, brittle, almost invisible, as if the cave itself remembered what the body once needed. What did those ancient hands know of pain and relief? Beneath the silence of this chamber, a story lingers. Imagine now the cavern not as ruin, but as refuge, The fire is alive, though small. Its light trembles against stone walls marked by smoke and the faintest echoes of handprints. A child lies upon a bed of woven grass and hide. Fever burns across the brow like an unseen sun. The air hums with quiet urgency. Beside the child, a healer kneels. She has gathered willow branches from the edge of a nearby stream where the soil remains cool and damp, even under relentless sky. She strips the bark slowly, her fingers steady, despite the weight of hope resting upon her. The bark is placed in a shallow stone bowl, water poured over it. The bowl is set near flame. Willow bark steeps in heated water, its bitterness a quiet promise. The scent rises, earthy, faintly sharp. The healer waits. She does not measure time by clock or star, but by the rhythm of breath and flame. Long before laboratories named the essence within that bark, before words like salicin and acid were carved into academic stone, these people trusted the tree's whisper. They listened. Some believed this knowledge came from watching animals. A deer chewing at a particular branch after injury. A bear resting beneath a certain tree in spring. Others say it was born of trial and error, of generations who tasted leaves and roots and remembered which soothed and which harmed. In forgotten corners of the earth, the forest was the first teacher. We move now beyond this single cave, across continents and centuries. In Sumer, clay tablets record mixtures of bark and resin, ground into pastes for aching joints. In ancient China, healers described trees as living reservoirs of cooling energy, their bark harvested at precise times marked by the moon. In the forests of Europe, elders carried bundles of dried roots at their belts, ready to steep into dark tea when winter's chill settled too deep in bone. Different languages, different skies, the same quiet faith in bark and root. How did such knowledge arise without instruments or formulas? Whispers tell us it was born of intimacy, an intimacy of observation, of seasons, of suffering, of slow experimentation, carried across generations like an unseen scroll. The body spoke in fever and tremor. The forest answered in leaf and fiber. When a remedy worked, its memory was folded into story. When it failed, its lesson was etched into caution. It is said that in those early days there was no separation between medicine and ritual. To gather bark was not simply to harvest, it was to ask. Some healers murmured gratitude to the tree before cutting into its skin. Others left offerings at the base of trunks, stones, seeds, fragments of bone. The tree was not object, it was ally. Back in the moonlit cavern, the water darkens as the bark releases its hidden gift. The healer lifts the bowl, blows gently across its surface, and brings it to the child's lips. The bitterness meets fevered tongue. The child flinches, then swallows. There is no certainty, only waiting. Outside, leaves tremble in night air. The stream continues its soft recitation over stone. Stars turn slowly beyond the cave mouth, indifferent yet luminous. Beneath the silence, the vigil continues. Hours pass like shadows, stretching and fading. The healer wipes the child's brow with a cloth dipped in cool water. She hums, not a song for gods, but a melody learned from her mother, who learned it from hers. The melody carries rhythm into the child's restless body, as if breath itself might become medicine. It is easy now to imagine that such practices were primitive, that without written formulas or measured doses, healing must have been guesswork. And yet, the bones in this cave tell another story. Some skeletons show signs of survival after severe injury, broken limbs that healed, teeth worn by years beyond youth. These were people cared for, watched over, treated. Somewhere in their dust lies a reminder. The first pharmacies were groves of trees, and the first prescriptions were written in shadow and bark. Perhaps the knowledge did not arise from a single moment of discovery, but from countless small observations layered like sediment. A grandmother noting that willow tea eased her headache. A hunter remembering which root stilled the ache of a sprained ankle. a child growing into adulthood with memories of taste and relief braided together. In this way, medicine became story, and story became survival. As the fire in the cavern dims to low embers, the child's breathing steadies. The fever recedes like a tide pulling back from shore. The healer exhales, not in triumph, but in gratitude. Outside, dawn begins its quiet approach. Pale light gathers at the horizon, touching treetops in silver. The cave shifts from black to deep blue. The vigil ends not with applause, but with stillness, and the bones remember. Centuries later, when explorers and archaeologists step into this limestone chamber, they do so with lanterns and notebooks. They brush away layers of dust and find traces of red ochre, fragments of bark, crushed herbs ground into sediment. They analyze, they record, they speak in careful tones about early medicinal practices, but beneath their measured language, something else lingers, a quiet awe. How did they know? Perhaps the answer is simpler than we imagine. The body and the forest once existed in constant dialogue. Humans walked barefoot across soil. They felt seasons shift in bone and blood. Illness was not abstract, it was intimate, and in that intimacy, patterns emerged. Marked by the moon, guided by sun and star, healers read the land the way others read scrolls. Today, willow bark is distilled into tablets sealed in silver foil. Its essence refined and named. It is measured in milligrams and prescribed in sterile rooms. There is nothing wrong with this. It is its own kind of wisdom. And yet, somewhere beneath this refinement, the original gesture remains. A hand reaching toward a tree, a bowl of water darkening with steeped bark, a vigil held in firelight. Where memory fades, the forest still stands. Perhaps the bones in the cave were never meant to be monuments. Perhaps they are simply reminders that before glass bottles and white coats, there were groves and clearings. Before formulas, there was listening. As you drift now towards sleep, imagine that cavern once more. The faint glow of embers, the healer's steady silhouette, the child resting at last, the willow tree outside, its branches brushing starlit sky. The bones lie in quiet formation, holding light they once felt on skin. They remember warmth, bitterness, breath. They remember hands that pressed bark to brow and waited through the long night. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Beneath the silence of modern life, beneath noise and haste, the forest still whispers, in the rustle of leaves, in the faint scent of crushed bark after rain, in the instinct to brew tea when the body aches. Perhaps the first pharmacies were never meant to vanish. Perhaps they were meant to root themselves inside us, and in the hush between waking and dream, you may almost hear it. The soft tremble of leaves in night air, the gentle simmer of bark in water, the steady rhythm of a child's returning breath. The bones remember, and somewhere in their dust, light still lingers. At the edge of a forest where twilight gathers like a soft cloak, a single ember glows. There is no temple of stone here, no carved altar, only earth, breath, and a shallow bowl of ash cradling a fragile flame. A hand reaches forward and places a sprig of cedar upon the ember's heart. Smoke rises, thin, silver, spiraling toward the darkening sky. It is said that there are medicines that enter not through the mouth, but through breath. Medicines that do not seek the bloodstream, but the unseen corridors of memory and spirit. In forgotten corners of the earth, healing began not with swallowing, but with inhaling. The smoke curls upward like a veiled prayer. Imagine now that you are standing there, the air cool against your skin, the scent of cedar unfurling, sharp, resinous, ancient. It enters quietly, without force. It lingers at the back of the throat, then settles deeper, like a whisper tracing the inner walls of the chest. Beneath the silence, something shifts. Long before words like anxiety or imbalance were etched into scrolls, there was a knowing that not all illness lives in flesh alone. Some believe that sorrow can root itself inside the body, that fear may drift through bone like winter wind, that grief, unspoken, can weigh upon the lungs like invisible dust. And so, smoke became the bridge. We move now across oceans and centuries, guided not by maps but by memory. In the Americas, where vast plains meet mountain shadow, healers gathered sage and cedar, sweetgrass and palo santo. They placed these sacred branches upon embers and fanned the rising veil across skin and hair. The smoke was not hurried, it was invited. Whispers tell us that it carried intention, carried prayers into spaces where words alone could not reach. Healers moved their hands in slow arcs, tracing circles of silver air around those who sought relief. The smoke brushed across shoulders, across brow, across the hollow between collarbones, where breath gathers and trembles. Illness was sometimes seen as a dislocation of the soul, a drifting away from one's center. Smoke, then, was the gentle call home. In these ceremonies there was rhythm, a drum perhaps, echoing like a second heartbeat, the steady exhale of the healer, the soft murmur of gratitude offered to plant and flame alike. Cedar was not simply burned, it was greeted, it was thanked. Marked by the moon, the ritual unfolded beneath star-marked skies. The scent threaded itself into fabric, into hair, into the very memory of those present. We drift now northward, across tundra and frozen river, into the vast white hush of Siberia. There, beneath a sky so wide it feels oceanic, shamans gathered juniper branches. They built small fires beside tents of hide and bone. Smoke rose into the Arctic night. It is said that in these lands, illness was understood as a fracture between body and spirit, a wandering of the inner self into shadow. The shaman, adorned with feathers and metal charms, moved through smoke like a figure between worlds. The juniper crackled softly, releasing a scent both bitter and clean. Beneath the silence of snow and wind, the smoke thickened into a veil. The shaman inhaled deeply, eyes half closed, breath steady. Some believe the smoke altered consciousness, opening gates within the mind. Others say it was the rhythm of drum and chant that carried healer and patient into a shared dream. But perhaps it was both. Perhaps healing was never only about what could be measured. The smoke moved across skin and through lungs. It carried warmth into cold air. It blurred the sharp edges of thought. It created a sacred enclosure, a temporary temple woven from breath and scent. In these moments, the boundary between body and spirit softened. It is easy now to dismiss what cannot be weighed or tested. Modern eyes seek proof in numbers, in charts, in visible change. Smoke disperses too quickly to be captured. Its work seems intangible, and yet, beneath the surface of science, something remains undeniable. The human nervous system responds to scent. A single fragrance can summon memory more vividly than sight or sound. The smell of cedar may call forth a childhood forest. The scent of smoke may evoke warmth, safety, gathering. These ceremonies were medicine for mind and meaning alike. They created space, a sacred pause. In the Americas, in Siberia, in distant temples of Asia and Africa, smoke marked transition, from illness to healing, from chaos to calm, from isolation to belonging. Communal breath became shared ritual. In forgotten corners of the earth, smoke was believed to cleanse unseen forces, energies clinging to the body like dust. Whether these forces were spiritual or psychological mattered little. What mattered was the act of clearing, of sweeping invisible rooms within the self. The smoke moved in spirals, rising and thinning. Its path was never straight. It curled and drifted, tracing patterns like celestial script against night. Imagine sitting within that veil. The drum slows, the healer's voice softens, the scent lingers in your lungs. For a moment there is no diagnosis, no label, only breath entering and leaving, marked by the moon and guided by flame. Beneath the silence, the body remembers how to settle. It is said that fire transforms what it touches. Wood becomes ash, solid becomes vapor. Perhaps smoke is transformation made visible, the crossing of matter into air, a reminder that what feels heavy may yet become light. In some traditions, the smoke was directed toward the four directions, toward sky and earth, toward ancestors whose names have crumbled into dust. It carried gratitude and grief alike. It held space for tears and laughter, for confession and release. Healing was never only chemical, it was communal, symbolic, shared. And yet, even now, in modern rooms filled with electric light, the instinct remains. Candles are lit in quiet moments. Incense burns during prayer or meditation. A stick of sage smolders near an open window. Where memory fades, ritual lingers. As the night deepens, the smoke begins to thin. What was once thick and swirling becomes delicate, almost transparent. The ember cools from bright orange to faint red. Ash settles into soft grey powder. The scent remains. It clings gently to hair and fabric. It rests in the folds of memory. It follows you long after the flame has gone dark. In the quiet after the ritual, there is no grand proclamation, no visible scar erased, only a subtle shift, a sense of spaciousness within the chest, a slowing of thought, a breath that feels less burdened. Perhaps this was always the true medicine, not the smoke itself, but the pause it created. The circle of people gathered together, the shared inhale, the acknowledgement that something unseen needed tending. Some ailments require not a pill, but a sacred pause. Perhaps it was never meant to be found in a bottle or measured in grams. Perhaps it was meant to be felt in the gentle rhythm of breath and flame. As you drift now toward sleep, imagine the ember once more. The cedar placed upon it, the first curl of silver rising into dark. Imagine the healer's steady hands, the hush of those gathered, the soft echo of drum against night. The smoke thins into starlight. The scent fades into memory, but something remains, subtle, veiled, sacred. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And in the hush between waking and dream, you may find yourself inhaling more slowly, more deeply, as if the ancient veil of smoke still moves around you. Not to cure, but to remind. That breath itself is a bridge, and sometimes healing begins there. At the bend of an ancient river, where reeds whisper to one another in the dusk, a woman kneels beside a bank of pale earth. The sky above her is vast and star-marked, fading from gold into indigo. The river moves in slow, oceanic rhythm, carrying fragments of mountain and memory in its current. Her hands press into the cool soil at the water's edge. She scoops a handful of clay, smooth, damp, the color of moonlit bone. It is said that before temples rose from stone, before scrolls recorded remedies in careful lines, the earth itself was the first apothecary. She lifts the clay and presses it gently onto her swollen ankle. The day's labor has left it warm and tender. The coolness of the earth sinks in slowly, like a whispered promise. There is no incantation, no spectacle, only contact between skin and soil, clay, humble, silent, everywhere. And yet, in forgotten corners of the earth, it once served as balm and purifier, as medicine not only for flesh, but for something quieter beneath it. Beneath the silence of the riverbank, a deeper story waits. We travel now to Mesopotamia, the land between rivers, where cities of mud brick rose beneath celestial skies. There, clay was not merely building material. It was language. It was memory. Tablets shaped from river silt bore inscriptions of trade, prayer, and healing. Whispers tell us that among those tablets were records of poultices and mineral pastes, mixtures of clay blended with oil and crushed herbs, applied to fevered skin, pressed against infected wounds, spread across aching joints worn by harvest and war. The earth was shaped into vessels to hold water and grain, and into medicine to hold pain. It is said that the soil near rivers carries particular gifts, fine particles that absorb heat and moisture, Ancient healers may not have spoken of minerals or bacteria. They did not need to. They observed. They noticed that certain clays cooled inflamed skin, that they drew out the wetness of infection, that when left to dry upon a wound, they seemed to pull something from it. Heat, perhaps, or corruption, or something less visible. Sorrow held in flesh. In the crumbled ruins of ancient settlements, archaeologists have found pottery stained with mineral residue, bowls once used to mix clay with plant ash, fragments of jars whose interiors whisper of past remedies. The evidence is subtle, traces clinging to dust. Beneath the silence of these sites, a quiet intelligence hums. How did they know? Perhaps the knowledge arose from proximity. These were people whose feet pressed bare into soil each day, whose homes were shaped from mud and straw, who felt the difference between dry earth and river silt, between sand and clay. The body and the ground were not strangers. In Egypt, along the Nile's patient course, similar practices emerged. Mud from the riverbanks was applied to skin not only for adornment, but for healing. It is said that even queens bathed in mineral-rich clay, believing it preserved youth and vitality. Farther east in the Indus Valley, clay and ash were combined into cooling pastes. In ancient Greece, certain earths were harvested from sacred hills, dried and powdered, then mixed with water to treat wounds and poison. Different lands, different languages, the same gesture, a hand reaching toward soil. There is something profoundly intimate in this act. To place earth upon the body is to acknowledge origin, to remember that beneath skin and bone we are composed of elements not unlike the ground itself: calcium from stone, iron from dust, water from rain. Some believe that clay's healing lies not only in its physical properties, but in its symbolism. To press it against pain is to return discomfort to its source, to let the earth absorb what burdens the body. The woman by the river shifts slightly. The clay upon her ankle begins to dry. A faint cracking forms across its surface, delicate lines like a map drawn by time. She watches the river's current. The sun sinks lower, gilding the water in amber light. It is said that as clay dries, it tightens. It draws warmth outward. It pulls moisture toward its surface. In this slow exchange, something passes between skin and soil. The earth gives, the earth receives. In ancient rituals, clay was sometimes applied not only to wounds, but to the forehead or chest during times of grief. A cooling hand against burning sorrow. A reminder that anguish too is temporary, that it may be absorbed, softened, returned to the vastness from which it came. In forgotten corners of the earth, mourners would smear ash and mud upon their skin as a sign of humility and connection. Dust to dust. The cycle acknowledged, the spiral unbroken. The contradiction arises like a distant ripple across water. In seeking ever more refined cures, distilled, purified, encapsulated, did we overlook the quiet intelligence of soil? Modern medicine has brought miracles, luminous and undeniable. And yet, the instinct to apply a cool cloth to a fevered brow remains. The urge to sit upon the ground when overwhelmed, to feel grass beneath fingers, to garden with bare hands. Where memory fades, instinct lingers. Clay is patient. It has watched civilizations rise from mud brick and crumble back into dust. It has been shaped into tablets bearing laws and poems, then shattered and buried. It has held seeds in darkness until they stirred into green life. It is ancient, sacred in its ordinariness. As twilight deepens, the woman by the river gently touches the clay upon her ankle. It is firm now, pale against her skin. She feels the warmth beneath it has lessened. The swelling seems quieter, as if soothed by contact with something older than pain itself. She rises slowly and steps toward the river. Kneeling once more, she lowers her ankle into cool water. The clay dissolves, drifting away in pale ribbons, returning to the current from which it came. Her hands follow, rinsing gently. In the soft mud beneath the water, her fingers leave faint imprints, temporary signatures in shifting earth. It is said that sometimes the cure was as simple as returning to the ground, not as a rejection of knowledge, but as a remembrance of belonging. In archaeological layers beneath modern cities, the same river silt persists, layer upon layer of habitation built upon clay, foundations resting upon ancient mud. Beneath skyscrapers and stone cathedrals, beneath roads and markets, the pale earth remains, unchanged, waiting. Perhaps clay was never meant to be extraordinary. Perhaps its power lies in its humility, in its willingness to receive without judgment, to cool without question, to remind us that we are not separate from what we walk upon. As night settles fully over the riverbank, stars begin to appear, small, luminous witnesses to countless such gestures across time. The woman gathers her belongings and walks slowly toward the shelter of reeds and woven walls. Behind her, the river continues its patient song. The bank of pale earth rests in silence. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Perhaps the clay that drew out sorrow still waits at the edge of every river, in every garden, beneath every paved street. Perhaps it is not lost, only overlooked, veiled by the illusion that healing must be complex to be profound. In the hush between waking and dream, imagine pressing your hand into cool soil, feel its softness, its steady presence. Imagine laying down the heat of your own quiet aches, letting the earth cradle them for a moment. The clay does not speak, it simply receives, and in that gentle exchange, skin to soil, warmth to coolness, something ancient stirs. A remembrance that we belong to this ground, that we are shaped from it and will one day return. The river flows. The clay dries and cracks and dissolves. The earth gives and receives in equal measure. Perhaps that was always enough. In a marble chamber veiled by night, water echoes softly against stone. There is an oculus open to the sky above, a perfect circle carved into the ceiling. Through it, moonlight pours like pale milk, pooling across the floor and touching the surface of a waiting bath. Steam rises in gentle spirals, drifting upward to meet the stars. It is said that in ancient cities, baths were not merely places of cleansing. They were sanctuaries of stillness. Imagine stepping barefoot across cool marble, the air warm and heavy with mineral breath. Your footsteps echo, then dissolve into the hush of water. Around you, columns rise like silent guardians, their surfaces marked by time and the faint memory of hands. The pool before you is calm, reflecting the moon in trembling silver. You lower yourself into it slowly. The water closes around your skin, warm and weightless. Muscles long burdened by labor begin to soften. Beneath the silence, something deeper stirs. We move now to the Roman Thermae, vast bathhouses that stood at the heart of cities like living temples. Their walls were adorned with mosaics of sea creatures and celestial forms. Light filtered through high windows, catching steam in luminous veils. Water flowed constantly, guided through aqueducts that stretched like arteries across the land. It is said that entire afternoons were spent within these chambers. Citizens moved from warm pools to hotter ones, from steam rooms to cold plunges, tracing a ritual of temperature and breath. Conversation drifted like mist. News was exchanged. Philosophies murmured. But beneath the social hum, another purpose pulsed. Immersion was medicine. Warm water eased muscles worn from harvest and battle. It softened scarred skin. It quieted the tremor of exhaustion. Inscriptions found on crumbled walls speak of gratitude, small carvings left by those who felt restored. Here I found relief. Here my pain dissolved. Yet Rome was not alone in its reverence for water. In distant valleys, far from marble and empire, sacred springs bubbled up from the earth's hidden chambers. These waters were believed to be marked by the moon, touched by celestial forces as they traveled through stone. Pilgrims journeyed miles to reach them, through forests and over hills, guided by whispers and memory. They carried offerings, coins, carved amulets, folded scraps of cloth. At the spring's edge, they knelt. The water shimmered, clear and cool, reflecting sky and branch. Each bubble rising from the depths was seen as a blessing, a breath from the underworld. In forgotten corners of the earth, these springs were guarded by myths. Some believed spirits dwelled within them, veiled figures of light and shadow who granted healing to those who approached with humility. Others saw the waters as tears of gods, fallen into stone and filtered into purity. Names were carved into rock beside the pools, offerings left in cracks and crevices. Where memory fades, the stone still bears these faint signatures, echoes of longing etched into mineral surface. Healing here was slow. It was social. It was shared. Families gathered at the edge of steaming pools. Elders eased themselves into warmth, their breath releasing in soft sighs. Children splashed gently, laughter rising and fading like birdsong. Strangers became companions in silence, their shoulders submerged beneath the same surface. The body softened, the mind followed. Some believe that mineral springs held specific gifts: sulfur for skin, iron for blood, salt for muscle. Ancient observers noted the differences between waters. Some were sharp in scent, others sweet. Some left a silky film upon the skin, others a crystalline residue. But perhaps the true medicine was not only in the minerals, perhaps it was in the ritual of pausing, in stepping away from the relentless rhythm of labor and entering a space devoted solely to being, in allowing warm water to cradle limbs and echo against marble walls. Beneath the silence of immersion, thoughts slow. The weight of the body feels lessened. The boundary between skin and water blurs. Breath deepens, aligning with the gentle lapping of liquid against stone. It is said that in certain temples, baths were preceded by prayer, words whispered into steam. Gratitude offered to the unseen forces that guided water through rock and root. Bathing became not only cleansing, but communion, a communion with Earth's hidden veins. Across the sea in Japan, hot springs, onsen, have long been revered. Steam rises from volcanic soil, carrying the scent of minerals and mountain air. Visitors enter these waters in quiet reverence. Conversation is hushed, movements are deliberate. Marked by the moon, the pools glow faintly beneath night sky. In these places one does not rush, one sits. One breathes, the warmth seeps into joints and marrow, the mind untangles. The world beyond the steam feels distant, softened by veil. The mystery remains. Was it the minerals, the warmth, the belief, or the communal rest that healed? Perhaps all at once. The body is not separate from the story it tells itself. To believe one is entering sacred water may be to open pathways within the self. To sit among others in shared silence may be to remember belonging. In modern cities, the echoes of these baths linger faintly. Spas and saunas attempt to recreate ancient rituals. Tiles replace marble. Fluorescent light replaces moon. And yet, beneath the noise of traffic and electric hum, springs continue to rise. Deep beneath asphalt and steel, water moves through stone in slow, patient spirals. It gathers minerals, warmth, memory. It waits for an opening, a crack in earth, a vent in rock, to emerge once more. It is said that water remembers its path, that it returns again and again to the surface, drawn by forces both seen and unseen. As night deepens over the marble chamber where we began, the pool grows still. The moon has shifted slightly in its arc. Steam thins, drifting upward in delicate threads. You sit immersed, shoulders barely above the surface. The echo of water against stone becomes rhythmic, almost like breath. In this suspended space, there is no urgency, no demand, only warmth. Perhaps the bath was never meant to be a cure in the strictest sense. Perhaps it was an invitation to slow, to soften, to listen to the quiet murmur beneath thought. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. As you rise from the water, droplets trace paths down your skin, returning to the pool below. You wrap yourself in linen or simple cloth. The air feels cooler now, sharper against damp warmth. Outside, stars burn softly above the open oculus. The marble chamber remains, patient and veiled. And somewhere beyond it, in distant valleys and hidden groves, springs continue their ancient rising. Pilgrims still gather, names are still carved, though faint. Offerings still rest beside rippling water. The bath of silence still waits. Perhaps it was never meant to be found in grand architecture alone. Perhaps it lives wherever water meets skin, in reverent pause. In a quiet bath drawn at day's end, in a lake reflecting the moon, in a river where you once stood and felt the current tug gently at your ankles. Beneath the silence, beneath the steam and echo, lies something elemental, a reminder that we are mostly water ourselves, that to enter it is to return, briefly, to origin. As sleep approaches, imagine the ripple of a pool beneath starlight, the warmth surrounding you, the marble cool against your back, the faint scent of mineral air. The water stills, the moonlight softens, and in that reflective hush you may sense it, the ancient understanding that healing can be as simple as immersion, as simple as stepping into silence and letting it hold you. In a dimly lit dwelling at the edge of a sleeping village, a single oil lamp trembles. Its flame bends and straightens in the soft current of night air, casting long shadows against earthen walls. The room is small, almost bare. A woven mat rests upon the floor. Outside, crickets weave their steady hymn beneath a star-marked sky. Inside, an elder sits beside a fevered child. No herbs simmer in bowls, no scrolls lie open with instructions, no instruments gleam in metal trays, only hands. It is said that before remedies were gathered into jars and names etched into tablets, healing often began with touch. A palm placed gently upon a brow, fingers resting at the wrist, a thumb tracing slow circles at the center of the chest. The elder's hands hover first, as if listening. Then they descend, lightly, reverently, onto the child's forehead. The skin is warm, breath comes unevenly. The elder closes her eyes for a moment, aligning her own breath with that of the child. Inhale, exhale. Beneath the silence of the room, something begins to shift. We move now across continents and centuries, following the quiet echo of hands laid upon skin. In ancient China, healers spoke of currents flowing through the body like invisible rivers. They traced these pathways not with blade or fire, but with fingertips. Gentle pressure along meridians, rhythmic strokes to restore balance. It is said that qi, the subtle breath of life, could be guided by attentive hands, that the body, when touched with intention, remembered its own harmony. In Africa's vast savannas, beneath skies so wide they seem oceanic, elders pressed their palms against aching limbs and weary backs. They murmured reassurance in low, steady tones. Children leaned into the warmth of mothers' hands. Warriors returned from hunts and lay beneath the patient touch of those who loved them. The medicine was simple: presence. Whispers tell us that in many cultures, the laying on of hands was not merely comfort, it was sacred exchange, energy passing between giver and receiver, heat flowing like unseen current, breath shared in quiet synchrony. Carvings etched into temple walls depict figures with palms extended, hovering above reclining forms. Scrolls illustrate healers seated beside the ill, their touch deliberate, serene. These images endure like faded prayers across stone and parchment. What did they believe was flowing through those hands? Perhaps it was something we no longer name easily. In forgotten corners of the earth, it was understood that the body responds not only to substances, but to attention. That a child held through fever sleeps more peacefully, that a hand clasped in grief steadies the trembling heart. The contradiction arises softly, like a ripple in still water. In a world of sterile rooms and distant cures, have we distanced ourselves from one of the oldest remedies? Modern medicine shines bright with knowledge and precision, and yet, within hospitals, there remains a quiet instinct, a nurse adjusting a blanket, a doctor resting a hand upon a shoulder before speaking difficult words, a loved one seated beside a bed, fingers intertwined with another's. The chamber of quiet hands has never entirely vanished. It simply grows quieter. Back in the dim dwelling, the elder shifts her touch from brow to wrist. Her fingers rest lightly over the pulse. She does not count numbers. She listens. The rhythm beneath her fingertips is uneven, but strong. She presses gently along the child's temples, then moves to the base of the neck. Her movements are slow, almost ceremonial. Each stroke deliberate, each pause filled with breath. It is said that human skin is a field of memory, that beneath its surface lie countless receptors attuned to warmth and pressure. A gentle touch can calm the nervous system, slow the heart, ease the cascade of fear. But the elder does not speak in such terms. She knows only that the body softens beneath kindness. Across ancient Greece, physicians believed that massage could realign the humors within the body. Oils were warmed between palms and smoothed across tense muscle. In India, practitioners of Ayurveda traced sacred patterns along limbs and spine, believing that oil and touch awakened dormant vitality. Different lands, different languages, the same gesture, hand to skin. Some believe that touch carries more than heat, that it carries reassurance, that in moments of illness, when the body feels foreign and fragile, the presence of another anchors us back into belonging. The child stirs slightly. The elder hums, a low, almost imperceptible melody. It is not meant to be heard clearly. It is meant to be felt, vibrating softly in the air between them. The fever still burns, but its edge seems less sharp. The child's breath begins to deepen, aligning more closely with the elder's steady rhythm. Beneath the silence, an invisible exchange unfolds. Outside, the moon rises higher, casting pale light through the doorway. Dust motes drift in its beam, suspended like tiny stars in motion. The village sleeps. The world narrows to this chamber, this breath, these hands. In ancient monasteries, monks were known to sit beside the ill through long nights, their hands resting lightly upon shoulders or backs. In native traditions, elders cupped the faces of the grieving, letting tears fall without interruption. Healing was not always about curing, it was about accompanying. In this accompaniment, something sacred reveals itself. Where memory fades, the body still remembers the first touch it ever knew, the warmth of a parent's chest, the steady rhythm of a heartbeat heard from within the womb. Touch is our earliest language, before words, before understanding. As night deepens in the dwelling, the elder's hands remain steady. She shifts again, now resting one palm upon the child's chest, the other upon the abdomen. She feels the rise and fall beneath her fingers. Breath slowing, muscles unwinding. The fever has not vanished entirely, but it no longer rages, it softens, like fire reduced to ember. It is said that sometimes the most sacred medicine was simply the presence of another human being, not as healer above patient, but as companion beside companion. In the hush between breaths, something ancient hums, a recognition that we are not meant to suffer alone. The elder opens her eyes. She watches the child's face, now calmer, flushed, but peaceful. She does not claim victory, she does not seek praise, she simply remains. Perhaps this is the deepest mystery of all, that in an age of distance and abstraction, the simplest act of touch retains quiet power. That beneath layers of technology and theory, the body still responds to warmth, to rhythm, to care. The chamber of quiet hands is not confined to ancient dwellings. It exists wherever someone chooses to stay, where a hand lingers a moment longer, where silence is shared without discomfort. As the lamp's flame lowers and the oil thins, The elder withdraws her hands slowly. The child sleeps now, breath even and soft. Outside, dawn hints faintly at the horizon, a pale wash of light beyond dark. The room remains hushed. The air holds the echo of warmth. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Perhaps touch is one of them. In the hush before sleep takes you, imagine a steady hand resting lightly upon your own brow. Not to fix, not to command, only to accompany. Feel the warmth, the gentle pressure, the unspoken reassurance carried through skin. The world beyond may be vast and restless, but within this chamber of quiet hands there is stillness. There is presence, there is breath meeting breath, and perhaps, beneath the silence, that has always been enough. At the edge of an ancient valley, where the earth folds into gentle terraces and the wind carries the scent of crushed leaves, there stands an orchard, long veiled by time. Its gate is simple, two weathered posts bound by rope, marked by the moon and worn smooth by countless hands. Beyond it, branches bend under the weight of fruit. Pomegranates split open like small crimson hearts. Figs hang heavy, their skins dark and soft. Olive trees twist toward the sky, their silver leaves trembling in the hush of evening. It is said that bitterness was once honored here, not avoided, not sweetened, but sought. Imagine walking slowly beneath these branches at dusk. The light is amber, fading into violet. Dust rises gently beneath your feet. The air is warm, almost oceanic in its stillness. A healer moves among the trees, gathering not the ripest fruit alone, but leaves, bark, and seeds, whose taste will cause the tongue to recoil. In forgotten corners of the earth, bitterness was understood as purifier. The healer plucks a leaf and crushes it between her fingers. The scent is sharp, green, almost metallic. She places it on her tongue without hesitation. Her face does not flinch. She nods, as if greeting an old companion. Whispers tell us that ancient herbalists valued bitter tonics above all others. They believed these flavors awakened the body from stagnation, stirred the digestive fire, cleared what had grown heavy and unmoving within. In clay cups shaped from river silt, mixtures were steeped, roots shaved thin, bark scraped carefully, seeds crushed into powder. Water poured over them, darkening as it absorbed their essence. The liquid that emerged was often almost unbearable to taste, yet it was trusted. Across Mesopotamia, tablets inscribed in cuneiform record remedies of bitter plants mixed with honey, not to erase their edge entirely, but to soften it just enough to swallow. In ancient Egypt, physicians prescribed infusions of bitter herbs to cleanse the body's channels. Greek healers spoke of balancing humors through sharp and astringent flavors. Different lands, different scrolls, the same respect for what challenged the palate. It is said that bitterness awakens, that it signals to the body that something potent is near. The tongue, encountering sharpness, sends messages inward. Saliva flows, digestion prepares, the internal fire stirs. But the ancients did not speak of enzymes or receptors. They spoke of balance, of clearing the heaviness that settles after indulgence, of scraping away unseen residue clinging to the inner walls of the self. Beneath the silence of the orchard, this philosophy took root. The healer gathers pomegranate rind, dries it in the sun until it curls and hardens. She grinds it into fine dust, mixes it with crushed fennel and wild greens. The resulting tonic is dark and fragrant, its bitterness softened only slightly by the memory of fruit. A young apprentice watches, hesitant. "Why must it taste so harsh?" the apprentice asks. The healer smiles, her eyes reflecting the last light of day. "It is said," she replies softly, "that what awakens us is rarely sweet." The mystery here lies not only in the herbs, but in the shift of the palate over centuries. Modern comfort favors sweetness. Sugar floods markets and kitchens. Bitterness is masked, avoided, dismissed as unpleasant. Where memory fades, the tongue forgets its full vocabulary. Once children were introduced to bitter greens early, leaves of dandelion and chicory chewed beneath watchful eyes. The flavor was strong, yes, but it taught resilience. It reminded the body of its capacity to process complexity. In ancient China, the 5 flavors, sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and pungent, were believed to correspond with organs and elements. Bitter was linked to the heart and fire, to clear excess heat, to restore equilibrium. In Ayurveda, bitterness was described as light and drying, capable of clearing toxins and sharpening perception. Bitter gourd, neem leaves, turmeric root, each carried its own sacred sharpness. The orchard becomes a living library of these truths. Under branches heavy with fruit, healers spoke quietly of how stagnation in the body mirrors stagnation in life, how clinging to comfort alone may dull the senses, how bitterness, though difficult, can cleanse. Each sip of tonic was an act of endurance, an act of faith. Imagine lifting a clay cup to your lips as dusk deepens. The liquid is dark, almost opaque. The scent rises, earthy, sharp, ancient. You hesitate for a moment, then drink. The taste spreads across your tongue like wildfire. It is not gentle. It does not flatter. It demands attention. Your face tightens, your breath catches, and then, slowly, something shifts. Saliva gathers. Warmth moves downward into the belly. The body responds. It is said that bitterness teaches patience, that it asks us to remain present even in discomfort. As night falls fully over the orchard, stars emerge between branches. The healer and apprentice sit upon woven mats, clay cups empty beside them. Crickets begin their steady song. The air cools. Seeds scatter quietly to the ground. In this orchard, sweetness and bitterness coexist. Pomegranate's ruby arils glisten with juice, yet its rind is astringent. Olive oil nourishes, yet the raw fruit is sharp and bracing. Nature offers both. But somewhere along the turning of centuries, we began to favor one and forget the other. The contradiction hums softly beneath the leaves. In seeking constant sweetness, did we lose something essential? A flavor that once kept us awake to imbalance? A taste that reminded us of limits and renewal? It is easy to imagine bitterness as punishment. Yet in the orchard, it was seen as teacher. A teacher that spoke not in comfort, but in clarity. As the healer rises to leave, she gathers a handful of seeds fallen into dust. She presses them into the soil at the base of a young tree. The act is quiet, almost invisible, a promise of future sharpness and fruit. Perhaps, she whispers to the apprentice, what heals us is not always pleasant. The apprentice nods slowly, understanding not with intellect alone, but with tongue and belly. Beneath the silence of the orchard, something ancient endures. The wind moves through branches in soft spirals. Leaves rustle like distant pages of a forgotten scroll. The moon rises higher, casting silver light upon fruit and soil alike. Taste, like memory, can be reclaimed. Even now, in modern kitchens, bitter greens can be gathered. Herbal teas steeped dark and strong. The first sip may surprise, the second may steady, the third may reveal a depth previously unnoticed. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some flavors only reveal their gift when we are willing to endure their edge. As you drift toward sleep, imagine yourself once more beneath the orchard's branches, the scent of leaves and dust in the air, the clay cup cool in your hands, the taste of something sharp and ancient upon your tongue. It does not flatter you, it awakens you. Seeds scatter into dust, trees stand patient beneath the stars. The orchard remains, veiled but present, waiting for those who remember that healing is not always sweet. Perhaps the medicine we forgot lies in flavors we chose to abandon. Perhaps bitterness, like night itself, was never meant to be feared, only entered slowly, with breath and trust. And in the hush between waking and dream, you may sense it, a faint, sharp note lingering at the edge of memory. A reminder that not all that nourishes must taste of honey. Some remedies arrive cloaked in shadow, and sometimes that is exactly what we need. In the center of a wide and silent plain, beneath a sky unbroken by walls or roofs, a patient lies upon a woven mat. The earth is cool beneath their back. The night stretches vast and oceanic above. Stars glimmer like distant embers scattered across an infinite hearth. A faint wind moves through tall grasses, bending them in silver waves. Beside the patient, a healer kneels, not looking down, but upward. It is said that once, long before lamps and cities dulled the sky, the heavens were the first scroll. Constellations arched across darkness like sacred script. The moon waxed and waned in patient cycles. Planets wandered slowly, tracing luminous paths that could be followed with careful eyes. Under these vast night skies, healers aligned their treatments not only with the pulse at the wrist, but with the turning of the cosmos. The patient breathes slowly. The healer studies the sky. She notes the phase of the moon, nearly full, swollen with pale light. She waits for a certain constellation to rise above the eastern horizon, its shape familiar as a childhood memory. Timing matters. In forgotten corners of the earth, medicine was entwined with rhythm. Among the ancient Egyptians, certain days were marked as auspicious for healing. Scrolls recorded which hours favored purification, which nights welcomed restoration. In Mesopotamia, priest healers observed eclipses and planetary conjunctions, believing these celestial movements echoed within the body. In China, physicians traced the dance of yin and yang through lunar cycles. They gathered herbs at specific phases of the moon, believing that sap and spirit moved differently beneath waxing light than waning shadow. Roots harvested in autumn carried a different potency than leaves plucked in spring. The body mirrored the cosmos. This was not mere superstition to them, but observation layered across generations. Just as tides respond to the moon, so too, they believed, did human blood and breath. Whispers tell us that ancient healers kept lunar calendars etched into stone and bone. Circles carved into rock marked the passage of months. Small notches recorded eclipses. These were not idle decorations. They were star maps of the healer's art. Beneath the silence of night, knowledge gathered slowly. Imagine now a stone circle standing alone upon a windswept hill. Its monoliths are crumbled, but still upright, aligned with the rising sun at solstice, with the setting moon at equinox. Healers once stood within its ring, watching the sky through carefully placed gaps. The turning of stars became a clock, a rhythm against which the body could be measured. The patient upon the mat shifts slightly. The healer's hand rests lightly upon their abdomen, feeling the rise and fall of breath. She closes her eyes briefly, aligning her own breathing with the cool night air. Some believe that illness was seen as misalignment, a drifting out of harmony with the greater pattern. Just as a star out of place would disturb the sky's design, so too might imbalance disturb the body's quiet orbit. The remedy, then, was not only substance. It was timing. Certain herbs were gathered under a crescent moon, when their leaves were said to be light and cooling. Others were harvested at full moon, when sap rose toward the sky. Seeds were planted according to celestial signs. Even surgeries in some traditions were delayed or advanced based on lunar phase. Was this belief, or was it pattern recognition? The contradiction surfaces gently, like a ripple in dark water. Modern medicine rejects astrology, dismissing the idea that distant stars dictate illness. And yet our bodies remain attuned to light and darkness. Circadian rhythms guide sleep and wakefulness. Hormones shift with sunrise and sunset. The moon still tugs at oceans, and we are, after all, made mostly of water. Where memory fades, biology continues its quiet dance. Back beneath the open sky, the constellation the healer awaited has risen. Its shape resembles a curved bow or a river in the heavens. She murmurs softly, not to the stars themselves, but to the pattern they represent. Perhaps the true power was never in the stars alone. Perhaps it was in the sense of order they offered. In a world where illness could strike without warning, where storms and drought shaped survival, the sky provided continuity. It returned each night with familiar markers. Orion in winter, the Pleiades in autumn, the slow, steady arc of the Milky Way. The heavens whispered, "There is pattern here, there is rhythm." In ancient Greece, physicians spoke of the critical days of illness, observing that fevers often peaked or broke at certain intervals. They noted cycles within cycles, searching for harmony between the patient's body and the greater world. In Mesoamerica, calendars intertwined ritual and medicine. The sacred count of days guided when to begin treatments, when to rest, when to give thanks. These systems were intricate, woven like celestial tapestries. Some believe that in aligning body with sky, ancient healers found comfort in continuity. Even if the stars did not govern disease, they governed expectation. They gave shape to uncertainty. The patient's breathing slows further. The healer begins a quiet ritual, burning a small bundle of dried herbs gathered under the last new moon. The smoke rises in faint spirals, joining the vast dome above. Stars wheel slowly overhead. The night deepens. Time feels less like a straight line and more like a circle. It is said that humans have always looked upward in search of meaning. The sky is both distant and intimate. It stretches beyond reach, yet its light falls gently upon skin and stone. In the hush of this plain, the healer feels herself part of something larger. Her small movements echo the turning of constellations. Her breath mirrors the slow arc of the moon. The patient, though unaware, rests within this pattern. Whether or not the heavens govern illness, they govern perspective. They remind us that we are not isolated sparks in darkness, but participants in a vast, unfolding design. As the night approaches its deepest hour, dew begins to gather upon the grass. The patient's fever has lessened, or perhaps it is simply that the air has cooled. The healer does not claim victory. She simply observes. Above, the stars shift ever so slightly. The constellation that rose in the east now climbs higher. Soon it will descend toward the west, as it has for countless generations. It is said that the ancients understood something subtle, that healing is not always about control, but about alignment, about finding one's place within a greater rhythm. In a world of sterile rooms and electric light, the sky is often forgotten. We move indoors, sealed from stars. Our nights glow artificial and bright. And yet, beneath the noise, our bodies still answer to dawn and dusk. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Perhaps the star maps of the healers were never about predicting fate, but about remembering continuity, about reassuring the sick that they remained part of a larger story. As the first hint of dawn begins to soften the horizon, the healer rises slowly. The patient sleeps now, wrapped in a cloak beneath fading starlight. The sky lightens from indigo to pale blue. One by one, the stars withdraw, not extinguished, but veiled by sun. The pattern remains, though unseen. Perhaps it was never meant to be grasped fully. Perhaps it was meant to be felt. As you drift towards sleep, imagine lying beneath that vast sky, the earth steady beneath you, the stars above tracing their ancient paths, your breath rising and falling in quiet synchrony with something far older than memory. Whether or not the heavens governed illness, they offered a sense of order, and in that order there was comfort. In that continuity, there was peace. The stars wheel slowly on, beyond walls and centuries, and beneath their patient turning, the body rests, aligned for a moment with the infinite, in the half-light of an excavation tent where canvas walls breathe gently in the wind. An archaeologist kneels upon a crumbled floor. The room is ancient, its stones worn smooth by centuries of footsteps long forgotten. dust hangs in the air like suspended memory. A small brush moves carefully across the earth, revealing the faint outline of something wrapped and brittle beneath the threshold of a doorway. It is said that not all medicines were displayed upon shelves or stored in jars. Some were hidden, buried beneath doorways, tucked into walls, pressed quietly into the bones of a home. The brush clears more dust. A bundle emerges, dried stems bound with faded thread. The scent, though faint, lingers still, earthy, sharp, familiar. Garlic cloves shriveled but intact. Sprigs of rosemary, brittle as parchment. Sage leaves reduced to pale fragments. These were protective charms, yes, but they were also something more intimate. In forgotten corners of the earth, the home itself became apothecary. Imagine now the house as it once stood, not in ruin, but alive. The doorway strong and upright, the floor newly laid. A mother kneels before the threshold, her fingers pressing a small bundle of herbs into the soil before sealing it beneath stone. She does not speak loudly, she whispers, a quiet invocation to health, to safety, to unseen guardians of breath and blood. Garlic to ward infection, rosemary for memory and clarity, sage for cleansing the air and spirit. Each plant chosen with care, its properties known not through textbooks, but through lineage and repetition. It is said that the threshold was a sacred space, a liminal line between inside and outside, between safety and uncertainty. To cross it was to move from the unpredictable world into the guarded embrace of home. So beneath that crossing point, medicine waited, hidden but close. Across ancient Europe, archaeologists have uncovered similar bundles buried beneath hearths and doorways. In medieval homes, shoes were concealed within walls alongside dried herbs, as if to confuse or deter unseen forces. In parts of Asia, charms of root and seed were placed near entrances, their presence both symbolic and practical. Whispers tell us that these objects were not acts of superstition alone. They were acts of preparation. In a world where illness could arrive unannounced, borne by wind, by traveler, by unseen contagion, families prepared in the ways they could. They planted gardens of medicinal herbs near their dwellings. They dried roots in the sun. They stored remedies close at hand. The root beneath the threshold was not decoration, it was readiness. In the ancient Middle East, clay tablets describe protective rituals performed at doorways. Oils were anointed along frames, herbs burned at the entrance to cleanse air. The home became a sacred enclosure, its boundaries marked not only by walls, but by intention. The emotional arc of these discoveries moves quietly from curiosity to reverence. For when the archaeologist lifts the brittle bundle from beneath the floor, she does not find magic spells or grand talismans. She finds care, simple, deliberate care. Each clove of garlic placed with purpose, each sprig of rosemary chosen and dried. Someone knelt here once, thinking of those who would pass over this threshold. Children with scraped knees, elders with weary steps, lovers returning at dusk. They prepared for unseen sickness long before it arrived. In forgotten corners of the earth, the scent of rosemary was believed to strengthen memory and protect against decay. Its sharp fragrance lingered in rooms where the ill lay resting. Garlic, pungent and strong, was thought to repel both infection and darker forces. Sage, when burned or hung near doors, cleansed stagnant air. The home itself breathed through these plants. It is said that in ancient Rome, wreaths of laurel and herbs were hung above doorways to guard against plague. In rural villages across Europe, small bundles of dried roots were sewn into the fabric of doorframes. Protection did not always announce itself. Sometimes it lay quietly beneath one's feet. Imagine now a family asleep within that ancient house. Evening shadows lengthen across the floor. The hearth's embers glow faintly. Outside, wind brushes against stone walls. Above the hidden bundle, children dream. They do not know what lies beneath the threshold. They do not think of garlic and sage pressed into soil, yet night after night those herbs remain. silent guardians at the crossing point. Beneath the silence of their sleep, the scent lingers faintly in wood and air. The archaeologist pauses, holding the fragile bundle in her palm. Dust clings to her fingers. She imagines the hands that placed it there. Were they steady? Were they anxious? Did they pray for protection from a sickness already moving through the village? There is no scroll that answers these questions, only this small, crumbled offering. The contradiction surfaces softly. In modern homes, medicine often lives far from thresholds, stored in cabinets prescribed by distant voices. We rely on systems vast and intricate, and yet the instinct to prepare remains. We keep remedies in kitchens and bathrooms. We stock first aid kits. We plant herbs in windowsills. Where memory fades, ritual echoes. The root beneath the threshold reminds us that protection was once woven directly into architecture, that a house was not merely shelter from rain and wind, but a living guardian of health. As evening deepens in our imagined ancient home, the mother who placed the bundle rises from her kneeling position. She smooths the floor above it, sealing the herbs into darkness. She stands and brushes dust from her hands. Perhaps she feels a quiet relief, not certainty, but effort made. Some believe that the power of such bundles lay not only in their medicinal properties, but in the act itself. In kneeling, in choosing herbs carefully, in acknowledging vulnerability and responding with care. The threshold becomes more than wood and stone. It becomes a vow. As centuries pass, the house falls into ruin. Walls crumble, roof collapses, the threshold sinks into earth, layers of dust and sediment gather, and still, beneath it all, the bundle remains, dried, fragile, waiting. When uncovered, it speaks without words, of mothers and fathers, of fear and foresight, of the quiet, steady love that prepares for illness before it knocks. As night settles fully in the present moment, imagine standing at your own doorway. Beneath your feet, the floor is solid. You may not have buried herbs there, yet protection still rests unseen. Locks on doors, habits of hygiene, memories of remedies passed down. Protection often lies beneath our feet, unnoticed but steadfast. The archaeologist carefully wraps the bundle in soft cloth for preservation. She places it in a box, marked with careful script. It will be studied, perhaps displayed behind glass, but its true meaning lingers beyond analysis. It is said that the most sacred medicines are those given quietly, without expectation of recognition. As you drift toward sleep, imagine that ancient threshold once more, the hidden root, the dried sage, the garlic cloves nestled in soil. Above them, a family resting in trust. Perhaps it was never meant to be found, perhaps it was meant only to guard. And in the hush between waking and dream, you may sense it, the quiet assurance that even when unseen, care surrounds you. Like a root beneath the threshold, silent, buried, faithful. At the edge of a desert where dunes lie like sleeping giants beneath a star-marked sky, a healer sits facing a single patient. There is no roof above them, no walls to contain the night, only sand, cool now after the sun's long departure, and the vast celestial dome arching in silence overhead. A small lantern flickers between them, its flame bending gently in the wind. The healer raises a hand, not to touch but to guide. "Inhale," she whispers, slowly. "Let the air settle inside you like dust drifting through sunlight." The patient obeys. Breath enters through the nose, cool and thin, traveling downward. The chest rises, the shoulders soften, the wind brushes across their skin, and for a moment the boundary between inner and outer begins to blur. It is said that in deserts and forests alike, breath was sacred. Not merely an unconscious rhythm, but a bridge between two worlds, between body and spirit, between earth and sky, between the visible and the veiled. In forgotten corners of the earth, breath was believed to carry more than oxygen. It carried life itself, ruach, prana, chi, pneuma. Different names, spoken under different constellations. The same understanding. Breath was both spirit and survival. Long before scrolls were written and temples raised, early humans noticed that breath changed with emotion. Fear quickened it, grief fractured it, joy expanded it. To steady breath was to steady the storm within. We move now from desert to forest, where tall trees rise like pillars beneath a canopy of leaves. Moonlight filters through in pale threads. A healer sits cross-legged upon moss, facing a patient whose chest trembles with anxiety. "Inhale to the count of 4, the healer murmurs softly. "Hold, exhale slowly, as if releasing smoke." The forest listens. Leaves rustle gently. Night creatures pause in their hidden watchfulness. The patient follows the rhythm, breath slowing gradually like waves settling after a storm. It is said that ancient breathing rituals appear in texts across continents. In India, sages described pranayama, control of breath, as a path to clarity and transcendence. In China, Taoist practitioners traced breath along invisible meridians, guiding it like a river through the body's valleys. In Greece, philosophers spoke of pneuma, the vital air animating flesh. In sacred Hebrew writings, breath and spirit share the same root. Ruach, wind that moves through lungs and over waters alike. Breath was not passive, it was participation. Beneath the silence of monasteries and mountain caves, practitioners sat in stillness, counting inhalations like beads upon a string. Each breath deliberate, each exhalation offered as prayer. In some traditions, it was said that when a child is born, the first inhale marks their entry into this world. When a person dies, the final exhale releases them from it. Breath is the threshold, the first and last act. And yet, as centuries turned and medicine grew louder, filled with instruments and formulas, breathing practices receded into the background. They became habit rather than ritual, automatic rather than sacred. The contradiction is intimate. Breath remains our constant companion, and yet we rarely notice it. In forgotten corners of the earth, healers observed that certain patterns of breath could cool anger, warm cold limbs, calm racing hearts. Slow inhalations to steady trembling. Deep exhalations to release grief. Imagine now a small stone cell in a desert monastery. A monk sits alone, candle burning low. He inhales deeply, drawing air down into his belly. He exhales, whispering a sacred word with each release. The rhythm becomes anchor. Outside, wind moves across sand in quiet spirals. Inside, breath mirrors that motion, entering, leaving, returning again. It is said that some ancient physicians would instruct patients to breathe in sync with the phases of the moon. Inhale during waxing light, exhale during waning shadow, to align internal rhythm with celestial cycle. Perhaps this was metaphor. Perhaps it was intuition. Modern science tells us that breath regulates the nervous system, that slow exhalations signal safety to the brain, that deep inhalations oxygenate blood and sharpen clarity. But long before such explanations, the ancients felt these truths in their bones. The body responded. Storms within the chest quieted. In villages nestled between mountains, elders taught children to breathe through pain, to inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth when laboring under heavy loads. In battlefields and birthing rooms alike, breath became a tool of endurance. Breath was medicine for the invisible. As the night deepens in our desert scene, the patient's breathing grows steady. The healer watches without judgment, simply counting silently with each rise and fall. "Inhale," she repeats softly. The air moves in, cool and dark. "Exhale." Warm breath escapes into the night, vanishing like mist. Between each inhale and exhale lies a brief pause, a stillness, a space where neither air enters nor leaves. Some believe that this pause is sacred, the breath between two worlds. In that fleeting suspension, time feels suspended as well. The patient becomes aware not of thoughts or worries, but of rhythm, of the steady, faithful exchange between self and sky. In forests, deserts, mountains and temples, countless humans have sat in similar stillness. No tools in hand, no herbs simmering, only breath. Perhaps the greatest mystery is that this medicine has never been lost. It requires no garden, no jar, no flame. It moves in and out of us with quiet constancy. As reeds sway beside a river at night, the wind threads through them in soft song. Their hollow stems echo faintly, like breath passing through lungs. Nature itself inhales and exhales, tides rising and falling, seasons waxing and waning. We are part of that rhythm. The healer lowers her hand now, sensing that the patient's storm has eased. There is no applause, no declaration of cure, only a quiet gratitude in the air. The lantern flickers lower. Stars continue their patient turning. Breath flows. Perhaps it was never meant to be forgotten, only rediscovered. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and breath is one of them. As you drift towards sleep, notice your own breathing. No need to change it. Simply observe the coolness entering, the warmth leaving, the gentle expansion of ribs, the subtle fall. Inhale. Let the air settle like dust in sunlight. Exhale. Release what you no longer need. The night wind moves through reeds. The desert cools beneath stars. And somewhere between one breath and the next, you may feel it, that quiet, sacred threshold, the breath between two worlds, ever present, ever patient, waiting only to be noticed. At the center of a forgotten clearing, beneath a sky washed in indigo and scattered with star-marked light, a circle of stones holds the faint glow of embers. The flames have quieted. What remains is a low, steady pulse of orange beneath soft grey ash. The air carries the scent of smoke, earthy, veiled, ancient. Around the circle, the silhouettes of tents and woven shelters rest in shadow. It is said that before temples rose and scrolls were inked, before jars were sealed and roots were catalogued, there was fire, not as spectacle, but as companion, as healer. The embers breathe faintly in the night air, their glow rising and dimming like a heartbeat. A figure kneels beside them, not to ignite a blaze, but to tend what remains. With careful hands, she shifts a stone slightly, allowing breath to reach the hidden coal. The fire that did not burn, it warmed without devouring, it healed without harm. In forgotten corners of the earth, fire was more than light against darkness. It was remedy. Heated stones were lifted from flame and wrapped in cloth, then pressed gently against aching limbs. The warmth seeped into muscle and bone, loosening what had tightened with cold and labor. It is said that heat was believed to draw illness outward, just as clay drew sorrow and herbs drew infection. A stone warmed by flame became a vessel of transformation. Across ancient camps, from the Arctic tundra to the savannas of Africa, fires burned at the heart of human settlement. Their presence kept predators at bay. Their smoke drifted upward, forming a thin spiral between earth and sky. Beneath the silence of night, fire guarded, and it healed. In one corner of the camp, a child coughs softly. A healer takes a small vessel of water and sets it near the embers. Steam begins to rise, faint and shimmering. The child leans close, inhaling warmth that eases the tightness in the chest. Smoke was used to dry damp wounds, to cleanse air heavy with sickness. Flames purified tools before blade met skin. The crackle of wood against flame became a language of comfort. Fire transformed raw food into nourishment, grain into bread, meat into sustenance, cold water into soothing steam. It was both destruction and creation, both danger and sanctuary. The mystery rests in how elemental it was. Healing began not with complexity, but with tending flame. Archaeologists have uncovered ancient hearths buried beneath layers of earth, ash upon ash upon ash, forming a quiet archive of human presence. Each layer marks a season, a generation, a vigil held through long nights. In caves etched with ochre and charcoal, hearths sit at the center, their stones blackened by time. The ash is analyzed, sifted for traces of seeds and bone. Yet beyond data and measurement, something deeper lingers. Reverence. It is said that early humans may have first encountered fire through lightning-struck trees or volcanic eruptions. But once captured, once cradled within stone circles, it became sacred. To tend flame was to guard life itself. In ancient Greece, the hearth was dedicated to Hestia, goddess of home and flame. In Rome, the Vestal Virgins kept the sacred fire burning, believing that if it died, so too might the city's fortune. In countless cultures, the hearth was the spiritual center of the dwelling. It was here that stories were told, here that wounds were warmed, here that herbs were dried and mixed. In forgotten corners of the earth, healers understood that heat could coax poison from flesh, that warmth could soften rigid joints, that steam could open the chest to breath. But they also understood something quieter. Fire gathered people. It drew bodies into circle. It created a space of shared warmth where silence could settle gently. Illness felt less isolating when faced beside flame. The embers in the clearing flicker as wind brushes across them. The kneeling figure adds a small branch, not enough to roar, only enough to sustain. Sparks rise briefly, tiny stars ascending and fading into night. The fire that did not burn. It did not consume recklessly. It did not rage. It remained controlled, contained within its stone boundary. Perhaps this is why it healed. Fire demands respect. It teaches balance. Too much, and it destroys. Too little, and it dies. In tending flame, ancient hands learned moderation. The heat of a stone pressed to skin must be warm, not scalding. The smoke cleansing a room must be gentle, not suffocating. Healing lay in the space between extremes. In the frozen north, stones were heated and placed inside shelters to keep cold at bay. In desert nights, embers provided steady warmth against sudden chill. Fire was both medicine and guardian against the unseen. Some believe that the glow of flame affects the human mind itself, that its flicker slows thought, that its warmth steadies breath. Even today, a candle's small light can quiet a restless room. Where memory fades, the instinct remains. In modern homes, fire hides within stoves and heaters, within electric coils and unseen currents. It is controlled, domesticated, yet its essence is unchanged. It still transforms, it still warms. As the night deepens in the clearing, the healer wraps a heated stone in cloth and presses it gently against the shoulder of an elder. The elder exhales slowly, tension dissolving under steady warmth. The fire hums softly. Above, stars wheel in silent arcs. The smoke rises in a thin column, dissolving into the vastness. It is said that fire mirrors the sun, that each hearth is a small echo of celestial flame. In tending it, humans participate in cosmic rhythm. A spark from earth reflecting a star from sky. The ashes beneath the stones hold centuries of such participation. Layer upon layer, silent testimony to nights spent in vigil and warmth. As dawn approaches, the embers dim further. Orange fades to red, red to grey. The healer does not mourn their fading. She knows that beneath ash, heat remains. A single breath can coax it back to glow. The fire that did not burn has not vanished. It rests, waiting. In the hush between night and dawn, there is a profound quiet. The camp sleeps. The stars begin to pale against the approaching light. The embers glow faintly one last time before settling into ash. Fire remains in every home, in every spark struck against stone, in every candle lit at twilight. The medicine was never truly buried. It glows softly beneath the surface. Perhaps it was never meant to be dramatic. Perhaps its power lies in steadiness, in constancy, in the simple act of tending. As you drift towards sleep, imagine that circle of stones once more, the embers breathing gently, the warmth touching skin, the quiet companionship of flame. Feel the subtle heat in your own chest, the warmth that pulses with each heartbeat. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and fire is one of them. In the hush between night and dawn, when the world holds its breath, the smallest ember can illuminate darkness. The fire that did not burn, the flame that healed without harm. It waits patiently, beneath ash and memory alike, for hands willing to tend it once more.